Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. This is Christian Witt from Compliance Management International representing DG3 in this public hearing. We have two attendees thus far at the 6 o'clock hour. We're expecting a couple more uh, based on the interest level, so we'll give them a few minutes if you don't mind waiting. But we're going to keep everybody on mute for now. If there's any questions, please type them into the question box on the screen, and we will try to answer your questions at the end of this session. We've had a couple more people log in. We're expecting a few more based on some of the interest level that we had. So please bear with me while we wait maybe a couple more minutes for those people to join. We'll probably start the session with the presentation around 6:05, if that's okay with everybody. Thank you. All right. Well, let me introduce myself again. I'm Christian Witt with Compliance Management International, representing DG3 in this public hearing for their Title V permit renewal and a permit modification that they made last year. This is a public information session or hearing regarding that as part of the environmental justice efforts with New Jersey. This is based using the Administrative Order 25. This is not part of the full EJ process, just for everybody to be aware. So what we'll be doing tonight, we'll make a brief introduction. We'll discuss the environmental impacts from an air quality standpoint. Um, we'll provide some information regarding the air quality operating permit in summary. And then we can open up to some public comment. If you have any questions as we're going through, feel free to write them in the question box on the screen, and we will answer them the best to our ability tonight. If we can't answer it tonight, we do need to provide responses to DEP for all questions asked moving forward. So the purpose of this is to encourage and engage in a dialogue with the public regarding the environmental impacts of the facility. It's to receive and respond to community concerns regarding any impacts from this action, provide information on the specific air quality permit renewal and modification actions impacts to the environment. So some housekeeping issues with the meeting. Um, any comments received will be indexed and cataloged for later publication. Everybody on the call will be kept muted while I'm speaking until the end. Questions can be asked in the question box if during the session. We would like to keep questions to less than 5 minutes per question if possible. And if time is exceeded overall for this section, all questions will be responded to, if not during this session. To give some information to the site, it is the full name of DG3. That's the short name for the facility. Is Diversified Global Graphics, located in Hudson County, New Jersey. Their air quality ID is 12059. This facility has been in existence for quite some time, and has had an operating permit for its entire existence. The current air permit that is being discussed here, the number is BOP, that's Bureau of Operating Permits, 210001. That means the renewal was done in 21, and it's the first renewal of this permit. One thing to note, that all operations at this facility are conducted entirely under the roof of the facility. There is nothing that is being operated that is outside of the facility. So the current operation at DG3, basically DG3 is a commercial printing operation using several different printing presses to produce commercial printed materials for a variety of customers. This could be uh, a car manufacturer for their brochures. It could be a college for their brochures, and it could be financial institutions looking for them to print their annual reports. So what does that mean? So the different types of presses that the facility operates include 3 sheet print presses. Basically, what that is that um, separated sheets of paper are fed to a printer, and through a series of stations with different colors, the sheets are printed upon using that method of using various colors and such at each station to print the materials. They also have 3 non-heat set web, which is basically a roll of paper that then is fed through a various stations for printing. And then is cured without heat being applied to the to the paper. There is one heat set press, which basically is very similar to the non-heat set presses, except they use a dryer to cure the ink um, in that press. So there's only one of those. And then the facility also has 3 digital printers on site. This is very similar to your home printer. Basically, they can send a graphic image digitally to the printer and set the and print that image using those printers. So, what current actions are we looking at? We're looking at the renewal of the air operating permit for the facility, which has been in existence for quite some time, and also a modification that occurred at the facility. The modification is basically DG3 replaced one of the sheet fed presses, that an older one, with a new one. So, what are the impacts of the proposed permit? Um, so, there's a couple operations that generate emissions. One is natural gas combustions. These are space heaters and the heat set web dryer at the facility, as well as the control device. Use natural gas at the and then will generate combustion emissions. Then is the printing press operations, where you have ink, cleaning solvents, coatings, and other chemistries that will emit volatile organic compounds and some air toxics from the operations. So what does the permit do? The permit limits the VOC content of the inks that DG3 is allowed to use. So they can't just use any coating that they so choose. They have to meet the criteria that is set by the permit. And then the cleaning emissions from the solvents are limited as well in the amount that they're allowed to use on an hourly and annual basis. And then the permit also limits the hours of operation of each press at the facility. The modification, as we said, DG3 replaced a sheet fed press last year with a new one that is more efficient and emits less VOCs and air toxins than the previous one. And there's some insignificant sources in the permit, such as water heaters and space heaters for comfort at the facility and use. The permit allows DG3 to emit the amount of pollutants listed here. So the VOCs from the total facility are 34.8 tons of VOC. The NOx is 3.01. The CO, the carbon monoxide emissions, are 0.095. The sulfur dioxide emissions are negligible. They're allowed to emit 0.62 tons of particulate matter to the air, and from hazardous air pollutants, they have 2 tons of emissions. The table below provides the hazardous air pollutants or air toxics that are in the permit now. With the renewed permit, a lot of these hazardous air pollutants will be removed because they are below the reporting threshold set by NJDEP. NJDEP does not require for them to be in the permit if they are below a certain threshold. They have deemed that to be of not concern. So the highlighted hazardous air pollutants here are the ones that are below the reporting threshold and will be removed from the permit moving forward. So what emission controls does DGV have in place as a result? One, they're required to limit the VOC content of the inks that they use and the HAPs that are emitted below the state standards. They're limited on the solvent and cleaning usage, which limits emissions. They're limited on the hours of operation they're allowed to run each press at the facility. The heat set press has a control device on it that reduces emissions from 99 by 99%. The reason why that press has a control device on it, that the heat set press uses inks that have a higher VOC content, and therefore we have to control those emissions from that operation. And in addition to all that, DG3 is planning to take a VOC limitation to become a minor source of emissions. So the current level that we provided to you, the 34.8 tons of VOC emissions, will be less than 25 tons per year of emissions from the facility. So I'd like to thank you for coming to this public hearing. If you have any written questions or comments after this, please feel free to send me an email with your questions. The public comment period began November 6th from the initial postings, and it remains open 30 days after this hearing. So the comments should be received by January 5th, 2024. However, I want to make you all aware that a 30-day extension has been requested. Therefore, comments could be submitted up to February 4th, 2024. Then DG3 must provide DEP and JDP with the responses to all comments received. With that being said, I'd like to conclude my presentation and open up the session to any questions that anybody has. So if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask me a question directly, or you can type it into the question box. Well, if no one has any questions, I mean, you can feel free to log off. I will remain on the webinar until till 8 o'clock, just in case anybody else uh, does log in at this time. But just wanted to let you know that the presentation is complete, and unless you have any questions, you can feel free to log off. Thank you. Okay, we do have a question written in the question box. It says, what specific measures and technologies does DG3 plan to implement to limit VOC and HAP emissions? And how does it aim to achieve neutral emissions? The specific measures that DG3 is implementing is becoming more sustainable. They are ever looking to revise their process chemistry to lower their VOC emissions, as well as the air toxic emissions and HAP emissions from the facility. So they're reformulating their inks, coatings, and the solvents that they use to lower those emissions as they progress. Um, as well as they're also implementing, as I said, the control device to reduce emissions by 99% from the one process uh, while as it operates. How does it aim to achieve neutral emissions? I'm not sure I understand that portion of it. Um, can you expand upon what you mean by neutral emission levels? Okay, we were asked to just disregard that second part of the question about the neutral emissions. And I'm sorry you're having audio problems. What the next question has been raised? What emergency response plans does DG3 have in place to address any unforeseen incidents, accidents that may pose immediate threat to the community's health and safety? Um, the air quality permit does not require the facility to have a emergency response plan to that effect. Um, However, the operations at DG3 are fairly benign and don't pose a risk to the community from an accident standpoint. Um, so another question has been raised. How does DG3 intend to mitigate the health impacts associated with specific HAPs it emits, taking into consideration factors such as the amount of the chemical present, duration of exposure, and vulnerable populations? I can't really speak to the vulnerable populations. I don't know the area that well. However, DG3 is consistently trying to look at new chemistries for its inks and solvents that it does, lowers the amount of air toxics it emits. DG3 does not emit a lot of air toxics compared to a lot of other facilities. Um, and they have gone through the risk assessment process um, with the NJDEP uh, uh, as a part of their permitting processes. I think we're down to just two attendees at this point. Are there any other questions that either one of you may have? Good evening. We had two people just join at 7:25. We went through the presentation earlier at 6. I guess I could go through it again if that's something you would like us to do. Excuse
Well,
me?
thank you so much. Thank you so much for that offer. Who and obviously, I guess there was one other person that just joined at 7:25. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Um, yeah, I just ask. I actually would. This is Doug O'Malley. I serve as the director of Environment New Jersey. I would like to take you up on that offer. Apologies, I wasn't able to join earlier. But in efforts not to be duplicative, from my sense, it would be kind of great to just hear, just a little bit more from the company. So if you do have a brief presentation, obviously you can kind of email that. But if I could indulge you a little bit to just kind of replicate what you talked about earlier, and thankfully it sounds like I had another, someone else join too, and I'm sure they'd appreciate, hearing a little bit of what occurred earlier.
Sure, that's not a problem. I'd be happy to. Let me just show my screen here. Okay, I assume you can see my screen. Is that correct?
Yep, I
Okay, great.
can. Yep, appreciate it.
Okay, well, I mean, this is a public hearing for DG3 for their Title V permit renewal and a modification that they applied for with the NJDEP. So the agenda for tonight was to provide.
And one question as you for you, kind of a
Go ahead. Doug, are you asking a question? I can't hear you, unfortunately. Doug, would you mind repeating the question? I just got a message
oh
that my audio was lost for a second.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't able to hear it. Yeah, so it's really three questions. One, is there a recording being kept of the hearing? Two, is there kind of a transcript of the hearing? And then three, are either of those things publicly available? And if so, when?
Um, so the hearing is being recorded. We are going to try to get a transcript of it. We were not successful in having it done automatically, but I think we can do
Hmm.
that after the meeting.
Yep,
Um,
as long as they're
and
recording.
and I do believe everything is publicly available. We have to submit this all to NJDEP when within 10 days after the hearing. So I would think they would it would be part of the public record at that point.
Great. That's welcome to hear. Heartened to hear. That's helpful to know. Thank you.
So to continue on with the presentation, well, we're going to have a brief introduction of the process here. We'll cover some of the environmental impacts of the action that we're talking about. A summary of the air quality permit action that is being sought by DG3 with the NJDP, and a public comment session.
Great.
So obviously the purpose of this meeting is to encourage and engage in dialogue with the public regarding environmental impacts of the facility, specifically with respect to the air permit, to receive and respond to any community concerns regarding the impacts of this action, and provide information specific to the air quality permit renewal and the modification that DG3 has with the NGDP. So with this meeting, obviously the meeting is being recorded. Comments will be received and will be indexed and cataloged for later published responses. We did have everybody on mute earlier, but we took that off to answer questions at the time, so nobody's on mute at this point. You can ask questions in the chat, or since there's not that many people online, if you just want to unmute yourself and ask any questions at the moment, we'll do our best to answer those questions at this time. If we are unable to answer those questions at this time, we will provide an answer and we'll get them all submitted to the NGDP after this is over. But we do ask that you ask questions that are limited that we only take about 5 minutes to deal with the question if possible. But seeing that we don't have that many people, I'm not sure that's a problem. So the site that we're dealing with is Diversified Global Graphics Group, also known as DG3, in Hudson County, New Jersey. Their air quality ID is 12059. Their current air permit is, the permit number is BOP 210001. The BOP stands for Bureau of Operating Permits. The 21 is the year that they submitted their renewal application, and the 1 is regarding the modifications that. Excuse me?
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Okay. And the other thing to note with the facility, all of the operations are inside the building. There is nothing outside the building from a process standpoint. DG3 is a commercial printer utilizing several printing operations to produce commercial printed materials for a variety of customers. Those customers can range from, an automobile manufacturer for brochures, a college brochure, or some financial institutions that do print their annual reports for that. So what does that mean from a facility standpoint with the variety of presses that they have? The variety of presses is they have what's called three sheet fed presses. Basically, they have sheets of paper that are fed into the printer, and through a series of stations, they're able to apply ink to those sheets of paper. And each station, it has a color to it, and therefore, they can print colored sheets of paper on the paper. The sheets of paper, are about 3 by 4 feet in length. They also have what's called three non-heat set web, where there's a roll of paper that is fed to various stations for printing, and the ink cures without any heat being applied to it. So therefore, you have non-heat set. The facility has one heat set web, which has a similar operation to what the non-heat set is. The only difference is it uses a dryer to cure the ink when it dries. And then they also have 3 digital printers. This is probably similar to any home printer that you may have used, or in an office somewhere, possibly, or at the library. Basically, they're able to send digital images to those printers and run a print off of those. So the current actions that are being sought by DG3 and under the environmental justice rule is a renewal of their operating permit and a modification where the facility has replaced one of their sheet fed presses. They replaced an older press with a newer press of similar nature. So what are the impacts of the permit renewal? I mean, basically the facility has some operations that um, that combust natural gas, such as space heaters and the heat set web dryer. So you'll get products of combustion as a result of that. And then the printing press operations where you have ink, and then they have to clean the presses with some solvent. Sometimes coatings are used, like a varnish, and other support chemistry as a result of the operation. So what does that mean with respect to the permit? So with the printing presses, the permit limits the VOC content that is allowed to be used by DG3 in the inks, and it limits the amount of cleaning solvents that it's allowed to use annually. Not only that, they also limit the hours of operation of all the presses at the facility. So they're not allowed to run just all year long at will. For the modification, DG3 did replace the sheet fed press, as I mentioned earlier, with a new one that is more efficient and emits less VOC and air toxics to the atmosphere. And then they do have what's called insignificant sources. These are small sources at a facility, such as similar to like your home water heater and some area space heaters for comfort heat in the building. Under the air quality permit renewal, there's the emissions are nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxides, volatile organic compounds, sulfur dioxides, and particulate matter. Those are short names, acronyms for those pollutants. So the emissions from the printing operations are basically just some VOCs and also what's known as hazardous air pollutants, also known as air toxics. In the permit, which should be publicly available, these are the emission limits for the entire facility for each of those pollutants. So for VOC, which is the main pollutant from the printing operations, they're limited to 34.8 tons of emissions. The others are much lower than that, where NOx being 3 tons, carbon monoxide is less than a ton, the sulfur dioxide is negligible, and the particulate matter is 0.62 tons of emissions total. The hazardous air pollutants of all of them combined is just over 2 tons of emissions. And as you can see by the table below, the hazardous air pollutants listed in the permit are ethylene glycol, xylene, cumene, ethylbenzene, triethylamine, and diglycol monobutyl ether. They are all less than a ton of emissions individually. And as you note that some of them are highlighted, and those will, when we renew the permit, these will no longer be listed in the permit because those are actually below NJDEP reporting thresholds. NJDEP has set in their rules certain levels of where these pollutants are not required to be listed in the permit, and these pollutants are all below those reporting thresholds.
So let me just interject here. So appreciate obviously kind of going through this in detail. This is exactly what I was hoping to get, and I apologize I couldn't join earlier. I did just want to take a pause because I know another member of the public joined. Just wanted to see if they had any questions. I have one or two to start off with. In actually going back to the last slide, but also focusing on this slide on VOCs. But just wanted to kind of offer for my co-participant if they have any additional questions.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Hi, my name is Lex Braithwaite, and I'm the environmental justice organizer for Clean Water Action. I actually have a couple questions. You responded to some of my comments through via email, but I hear you saying that you guys want to limit use of VOCs to a threshold that's not reportable, but DG3 has a lot of violations that include going over their emission limit. One, how does that factor in? And two, how can you be applying for a lesser permit if you applied for Title V, which is a major air permit?
Okay, I think so. I'm not exactly sure which violations you are referring to.
I mean, there are many. There are, like almost every violation includes exceeding emissions.
Well, well, they've resolved those violations with the NJDEP at that time, and I've only been involved with the facility since 2019, and since that time, I am not aware of any air quality violations that they've had with the NJDEP.
Okay, there are a lot of them, especially from 2021. That includes going over specifically your annual fountain solution material usage. And often you guys go over by like hundreds of gallons. I'm seeing one here for 550 gallons that was supposed to be used, and instead you guys use 717. So what about this air permit prevents stuff like that from happening? And if it's true that you guys aren't going to be required to report it, how can the community trust that you're not going to go over your emissions anyway?
Well, I'm not aware of being over that any limits in 2021. We would have been heavily involved with that situation. Um, and their emissions have been below their emission limits since I've been with the facility in 2019.
Okay, then another question then. I'm not sure like where you've been reading or not reading their non-compliance violations, but they also have a problem submitting their emissions records on time. I'm seeing a violation here that says that they were supposed to submit it in January and they didn't until, sorry, they were supposed to submit it in July and they didn't do it until January. Again, how can we trust as a community that the DG3 is going to honor the commitments not only to the DEP, but also to the community that they're in?
Can you be more specific in what report that was required that was due in July and not reported into January?
Yeah, it was open March 18th, 2021 and closed the next day. You violated NJ law AC/27-22. It says you submitted your 6-month deviation report to the department electronically on January 26, 2018. This report was due by July 30th, 2017.
Okay, so that was in 2018.
Yeah, and that might be another question. Why does it take so long for the DEP to investigate these types of things? Because if it's true that in 2018 you guys didn't submit your report, why didn't you guys do it on your own?
I can't speak to that. I was not involved with the facility in 2018. And I cannot speak to why it takes the DEP so long to handle these matters.
Okay, so get back to my other question. Is there anything, because I know you're a representative of DG3 and not like actually part of it, is there anything that the CEO or somebody has said about going over their limits consistently and then asking for a minor air permit, especially when, again, how can you be applying for a minor air permit if you applied for a Title V major source permit?
Well, the facility can accept a more stringent limit with respect to air emissions and thus become a minor source of air and not be a Title V facility any longer.
Okay, so to clarify, you applied as a Title V, but you're in conversation with the DEP and you've agreed to not to be a minor source now?
We are about to initiate that process. We haven't done it yet, but now we're about to.
Okay, so forward facing to the community, you guys are still a major source and continue to be given your permit status?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. I have more questions, but that can, those can wait.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, X. And I just wanted to thank, your advocacy and leadership representing the community and Clean Water Action, as well as your partnership with Sustainable Jersey. And just appreciate this line of questioning, because I'm certainly, the presentation has been helpful, but I think X's questions are getting to some of the questions that I had. So just to clarify this, the facility is applying for a Title V permit, even though the facility is in the process of working to accept a more stringent air pollution standard. Is that correct? Am I hearing that correctly for minor air permits?
That is correct.
That is correct. And what is the timeline? Because obviously Title V permits aren't exactly, they don't come up every month. What is the timeline for the more stringent air pollution standards that the facility is considering, and what does that process look like?
Well, the process is that we will prepare an application showing the NJDEP how we will limit our emissions, and if they agree with it, they will review the application and issue a new permit to the facility.
And does the facility have a timeline? I mean, obviously you can't control DEP, but you can control your kind of own internal processes. So does the facility have a timeline for when that application will be made to DEP?
Yeah, we're looking to have it in the first quarter of next year.
So Q1 of 2024.
That is correct.
Great. And then just, because you're living and breathing this stuff, pardon the pun, on the timeline. What is the timeline for the Title V permit?
What is the timeline of the Title V permit?
Yeah.
To be issued?
It sounds like, well, yes, for, review and issue, because it sounds like we have two parallel tracks here. I'm just trying to get a sense of the timeline from the facility's perspective on the Title V permit renewal, as well as the more stringent air pollution standard that will be initiated in Q1.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. We submitted the renewal application in 2021 as required by the permit. And it has been with the DEP since that time.
Yep.
And this public meeting is part of the process. So once we have this public meeting and we answer all the comments and go through the EJ process, DEP will evaluate all those comments and questions and see if there's any further action that's needed with the permit. And then once it's done with that, then they will issue a final permit.
Yes. So really the question here is maybe not a, well, I shouldn't say a fair question, but you're not the decider, obviously, when DEP acts, but is there any indication the department has given the facility on how long their process will take to review the results of this hearing, and then for the department to take final action on that permit renewal?
Yeah, I cannot speak to DEP's timeline.
But you understand, but just from, I guess, past experience, is there any estimate on how long? I assume 2024, but and obviously we can follow up separately with the department to kind of ask that question. But any guesstimate you'd like to give here?
I don't want to guess a time frame. We submitted an application in 2021, and we still haven't had a permit yet. So
understood. Okay. Yeah. And then just on things that are a little more in your control. So you're looking in Q1 of really next month, right? And the start of the new year, right? The start of the new year.
Q1 is 3 months, so yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I assume the work will, if it's not already going, will certainly start next month. And obviously, being particular, March 31st, 2024. But in terms of, early next year, maybe that's a better term of phrase. Early next year, the process begins on your end. What can you just talk more about that timeline? I assume it doesn't end in Q1, but maybe it does. You tell me.
Our timeline?
Yeah, your timeline. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I understand the question entirely, but
Yeah.
we will prepare an application and have it submitted at some point in Q1 to the DEP for them to review.
Got it. Okay, that's exactly what I was trying to find. So it's not just the work will begin in Q1. The application will be submitted ideally by the end of the first quarter, so end of March of 24, and then
Correct.
obviously it will be in. Got it. And then could you just walk through? You kind of talked, obviously more stringent. Can you just kind of walk through a little bit more, and kind of what that looks like, and what that means for the facility as well as for the emissions?
Well, the emissions will be lowered, but that they are allowed to emit, and thus by having that below the major source thresholds, they will no longer be a Title V facility.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
actually have a couple questions.
Jump
Do
in.
you mind? Yeah.
Please ask.
This
Yeah.
is kind of off topic. Honestly, I'm gonna be real. I know everything I need to know. So this PowerPoint isn't necessarily helping me, but the stuff that I couldn't figure out is what I have questions about. One, would you characterize DG3's work as factory work? Two, do you keep health data on workers there?
Is it factory work?
Yeah, like is it factory type production, like Amazon, HelloFresh? Are people working in factory conditions, or is it like an office job where they're sitting
Oh
down
no,
typing?
it's a they do commercial printing for customers. So I guess if where you're asking, it is more factory oriented. Yes, it's not just
Got it.
office work.
Okay, awesome. So do you guys keep health data on workers?
Do we keep health data on workers? We must make
Yeah.
sure our workers are safe, and if there is
Would
an
you
incident
be
where they hurt, we do need to track that. Yes.
Okay, would you be willing to share relevant health data specifically about VOCs with the community? And I have a specific reason for that question. Candace, who's the director of the Environmental Justice Department of the DEP, I had a conversation with her and she sent me your public notice and I couldn't find it from the site, from the homepage of the site that you guys posted it on. I searched DG3 and 4 obituaries for DG3 workers came up. I'm not making any judgments about it, but I'm wondering because this is a cause for concern from other community members, do you guys keep health data? If not, why?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up with your question there. Would you mind repeating it?
I found 4 obituaries of DG3 workers who seem to have been working there for an extended period of time. Given that you guys use VOCs and these solvents, do you keep health data on workers? And if not, why?
I can't speak to that part for DG3.
Okay, so anything you can't speak to, I will get a response eventually, right?
Excuse me?
So I know during the public session, some people prefer to reserve answers to questions for after. Will I be getting an answer to that question once you
Yeah,
refer back to?
we must provide a response to every question that is answered.
Okay, awesome. Let's see. And my next question is about specifically, you said that HAPs are below emission standards, but not VOCs. Do you guys plan to limit HAPs as well, or just get VOCs below reportable levels?
Are we looking? Well, the hats are already below major source thresholds.
Okay. Do you guys have any plans to engage with the community on this? Because DG3 is right next to Liberty State Park, which has a summer camp every year as well as other events, obviously. And the VOCs are affecting that community. So do you guys have any plans to engage other than this public hearing?
I would have to talk to DG3 about that. I'm not aware of anything right now, but we would have to respond to that question.
Okay, got it. What is a sludge facility and why does it say that that is also what DG3 qualifies as?
I do not know what a sludge facility is, and DG3 is not a sludge facility.
Okay, so if I go on the NJDP page and find that you guys qualify as a a sludge facility, who do I tell that to? Is that wrong?
Yeah, I'm not aware. I don't understand how they're categorized as a. I don't even know what a sludge facility would be, honestly. So,
Yeah, if you've ever visited the EJ map that the DEP sends or has on their website under the stressor summary as well as the facilities, it says that DEP3 is a sludge facility. So maybe you should look into that because I'm not too sure of that.
okay, I appreciate that.
Mhm. Yeah, but I'm done for now. Thank you.
Super. I really appreciate those additional questions, X. Um, certainly on the health of workers at the site. So yeah, just to kind of follow up on some of those questions because those were a little bit in the back of my mind, and you're obviously bringing it more to the fore mind. So there obviously have been some questions that have previously been asked to Christian Witt, specifically on the disposal of the VOCs and the hazardous air pollutants chemicals. And as you might suspect, some the disposal, some of it is to the air for VOCs and for the HAPs, as well as the solid waste treatment facilities. And I'm just curious on kind of where those solid waste treatment facilities are and what the transport looks like from GD3 to the solid waste treatment facilities.
So, the transport of the waste from DG3, they're in enclosed drums that meet DOT requirements, and they are taken by truck off-site to various disposal facilities throughout the United States, actually.
I know we're going to a close, so I just want to ask one more question. You don't have to answer it now, but I'm also seeing here that you guys have installed equipment without an operating permit and contacting the DEP before or after you were there. I'm wondering if what prevents them from installing illegal machinery if they've done it in the past under this new air permit,
Well,
especially if you have to be reporting less. Like, if they're reporting less and they're already breaking the rules, doesn't that justify them breaking more?
well, I know DG3 doesn't want to break the rules, so we help them make sure that they are staying in compliance with the requirements.
Hmm.
And
I
I
don't
guess
think that's a question though. You guys installed a bindery and a splitting machine, and not only that, but on the DG3 website, it says a splitting machine is often or the workers are often in hot and humid conditions, and splitting machines aren't supposed to be operated in hot and humid conditions. So, with that, how does the community know that you guys won't violate the same rules that you've been violating in the past?
I'm gonna have to not be. I can't answer that question. We'll have to answer that. Um, outside of this meeting.
That's fine. I just wanted to get it in there on public record, but thank you so much.
Sure.
Sure. And then I do know we're getting close to time, but X's questions, it does bring up a kind of a broader question in my mind of what what the facility is required to do and what the facility should be doing, right? Especially regarding the environmental justice law, which I think, no, not coincidentally, GG3 submitted their application 19 days before the EJ law was enacted on April 15th of 22. That being said, nothing in the administrative order will limit the department's authority to reopen or further extend any public comment period on a case-by-case basis consistent. I believe, beyond just this public hearing, the kind of numerous questions that X on behalf of Clean Water Action has submitted, obviously should be answered. But I think there's a kind of a bigger issue here, and this is not just that DG3 is located literally on the, steps of Liberty State Park, which has, more than 4 million visitors per year, but also where in the perimeter of Liberty State Park the facility is located, and that's right by the Turnpike extension. So when we talk about overburdened communities from the environmental justice law, we are literally talking about those communities in Ward, in Ward E that are right but not only by the park, but are already overburdened with pollution. So this is why those VOCs that are being emitted, are a huge issue. And we already have obviously a Title V permit that is moving forward, and a permit, a separate permit process to strengthen those standards. We would obviously ask the DEP and honestly GG3 to be looking at the current process and the permit, and to withdraw the Title V permit, to have stronger standards to immediately help workers. I'm someone I've actually worked at my college paper. I worked closely with folks that ran the presses. I worked with some of those chemicals. You did not want to touch those chemicals, right? And that was obviously for a short period of time. You have printing women and men that potentially can have years of exposure. Some of the kind of the worst, health clusters for cancer in the state came from dyes. And that's ultimately what Siva Geigy did down in Toms River, is they worked with dyes. They weren't a printing press, but it's a similar process, right? So I think it's critical as we think about not only the safety of workers in the facility and also the safety of the public, to be looking at more closely at ways that GG3 can be reducing those emissions, not just in a kind of a future moment, but in this current process right now. So thank you again for this time and for the ability to kind of join a little late and to hear this presentation, but strongly encourage just a full response to all the questions that the public and advocates like myself and X are bringing up, but also the written questions that have been submitted on behalf of the environmental community. So thank you again, and look forward to seeing the responses to all those questions and the questions from this hearing.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for attending this public hearing, and we appreciate your input.
Thank you, Doug. I really appreciate your comments. They were very helpful. And thank you, Christian, for explaining some things to me. I hope you have a good night.
All right. You too.
Super. Thank you, Christian. Thank you,
you.
X. Take care. Bye-bye.